Welcome to Familiar Territory, an anime podcast hosted by two white dudes who've been friends for over 15 years. Here we talk about the history and influence of anime, as well as review anime new and old. So grab your talking cap and transform into some comfy clothes as we step into a familiar territory. My name is Grant.
And I'm Brantley. Heads up, spoilers on the way. Check the description, see if you're safe to listen. Okay, class, time to pick partners for your creative writing project. Come on, chop chop. Hey, we're sitting next to each other, so I think we're fated to be partners. Do you like reading? I'm a big reader. I love to write. I love fan fiction. Have you ever heard of Dojin? Hey, what are you drawing? Oh, this? It's a tattoo design of a skull eating George Washington. That's just how I see the world. Do you ever crack an egg open and wonder if that was a baby? I do, every single day. That's a lot of eggs to eat. Hey, are you a lesbian? Yeah, I'm a lesbian. Cool, I'm a lesbian too. Yeah, me too. These students were actually the same person, Jogi Shiraishi, the writer of the light novel Majo no Tabi Tabi, also known as Journey of Elaina, or Wandering Witch, The Journey of Elaina. Grant, what is this show?
Weird. See, I didn't know what you were going to do.
Was that you talking to me, or was it you?
Wait, what?
Was that you commenting on my roleplay just now, or was that you describing the show?
Both. No, I kind of got where you were going from because I was like, what the fuck is he doing? And then when you said, I like fan fiction and happy stuff and then a skull, I'm like, damn, that is this fucking show.
Oh.
So this show is a roller coaster, but not like a roller coaster where you have an up and you're like, oh boy, I wonder what's gonna make me depressed, and then a down, and then you get depressed, and then it has another up. Brantley, have you ever been on like one of those like tower rides where it shoots you up and then brings you down and then shoots you up and you don't know when you're gonna go up and you don't know when you're gonna go down and it just keeps happening over and over again?
Yeah, I went on like the baby version of that.
Yeah.
It had like a frog design that would like hug you to keep you in the seat, and I was just kind of like, get me out. So yes.
But yeah, it's that. Because
it is.
This show, we watched the first 6 episodes. We will watch the rest of it when it comes out because as of recording this, it only has 8 episodes out. So we watched the first 6, we'll watch the second half, and we'll talk about the whole series. But since we only have 6 episodes, I think we can talk about every episode we've seen so far.
Yeah.
So what do you think of Journey of Elaina?
I do think it's an undulation.
You're gonna have to define that word.
Like it's like up and down, you know, like it's unexpectedly like erratic in how it's throwing you around. It's not paced like you'd expect. The fact that we were like 7 minutes into an episode and then that episode ended to start a new episode within the same episode, should hopefully tell you that like format is not that much of a concern for this show. Like if they're like, well, this is not enough for one episode, so we'll just like do a halvesies. We won't even make it like a clean split in the middle. Like they'll do that. So it's interesting. I feel like this show has a bit of like wanderlust to it, where it's just kind of trying things out from like a writing perspective. And I guess maybe that would reflect on the light novel more than the actual anime trying to follow along. But I haven't read the light novel, so I can only speak on the anime.
Yeah, I haven't read the light novel either.
Yeah. So I do want you to, if you can recall, what detail locked us in on like watching this show?
Oh, it's the fucking big hat, yo.
That's not what I had in mind, but you're super right. We love big hats, as our inspector review revealed, and what this will reveal as well. Big hats are just good. But I recall you had found an interview from someone on staff, right?
Oh yeah. The light novelist, the guy who wrote it, who's what's his name again?
Jogi Shiraishi.
Jogi Shiraishi said, while you animate this, please no panty shots. I don't want there to be any panty shots. And they haven't. And it's great. I remember reading it and I'm like, oh, thank fucking God, man. Have some pride in your characters, damn it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just kind of a weight off the shoulders for us to be like, well, good, that's one less thing we have to just like justify in our review. I mean, we have other issues here and there, but we'll get to that. So yeah, that was like a big hopeful thing we're walking in with.
Yeah, so we'll start with episode 1. So the plot of this show is Elaina is a silver-haired girl who wants to be a witch. And so at like a young age, she wants to be a witch. And she's like, hey, I gotta study and all this stuff. And she becomes the youngest witch to pass the apprentice exams, which makes other witches not want her because they don't want her to show them up. And then she kind of gets in with this witch that hangs out in the woods, who makes her do bullshit chores and tells her to, and overworks her without actually teaching her. And then she fights her with magic and defeats her and makes Elaina cry. And then's like, hey, all the shit I was telling you to do is because you need to learn to say no so you don't take too much responsibility. And it was great. And the fight scenes were good, and there was a good anime dad. And I love good anime dads.
As you know, we are not your dads.
We
so
are
when
not.
We see a good anime dad, it's like, yeah, that's a good anime dad.
Hell yeah. But so let's talk a little bit about the first episode. I was really excited about this. So obviously this is coming after we watched Gibiato, whatever you want to call it.
Gibiato.
And it was exciting watching something that was good. And the first episode, in my opinion, so far has been the best episode. I think that there's something exciting about like the training montage, and it kind of sets the backdrop for the show. So instead of it being a starting point for the show, it's just the background knowledge, because within the first episode there's like a 4-year time skip. So you learn how Elaina became a witch, what her plans are, and that's about it. It's not exactly like the jumping off point so much as here is who Elaina is as a person and how she became this witch. The episodes so far are pretty episodic, where they kind of don't deal with too much in the past. You'll get characters that you met in previous episodes, but that's about it. What did you like? What did you think of the first episode?
Is healing for sure. I think that the topic touches me personally, as someone who sort of victimized myself with overwork. It's so like it definitely struck a chord, just because it's like, oh, I've literally been in this kind of situation before. But just like I was particularly impressed by the fact that the Stardust Witch, who we do have to clear up, we have to clear Fran's name or Flan's name, because it's one or the other. It gets romanized either as Fran, like much like Elaina is like an English name, or at least I think it is. Etymologically, maybe it's not. But Fran is a name that's familiar to me as an English speaker. However, I also see it get listed as Flan, and so it's not like Fran is a more normal name and goes in the vein of Elaina being a name in this universe, but Flan is actually probably closer to the Japanese pronunciation, which is Fudan.
I think Fran is gonna have to be it, just because that's what Hulu gave us as the subtitles.
I've seen Fran more frequently, so we're gonna do that. We're not gonna go halvesies and do Fran. That would be dumb, I think. So, Fran it is. I like that Fran is not like an above it all, like wise teacher. As she's trying to basically deal this task for Elaina, she's stumbling through it. And like the fact that like she definitely goes overboard and then has to course correct, I could appreciate that.
Yeah.
It would have been very easy to make her above it all and just be like, ah, yes, child, you've learned a lesson. But I think it's a lot more interesting that she actually went too far and then has to roll it back. And then both characters are kind of in this mess together. I think that like more deeply entrenches them as a pair. And I just I really love that.
Yeah.
I just feel that too from like the, you know, I am an outsider to Japanese culture, but in attempting to learn about Japanese culture through studies and whatnot, I feel like it's got to be relevant on the home turf as well. To be like essentially the equivalent of you're going to cram school, you're, you know, getting ready to go to a big college, you're doing all this and you're still very young, you know, and you're doing that because there are many others like you, and even worse, you're inspired to by other young prodigies and gifted children, and so like there's this like self-indulgent competition that's, you know, done there and needs kind of decoupling for a healthy lifestyle. And so again, seeing that displayed and the moral not being like, it's good that you work yourself very hard, but don't work that hard. It's literally like, you have to not do this. They put their foot down on it, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah. I also want to talk about the action sequence of that episode. So this show doesn't have a ton of action sequences, but when they do, they're pretty good. I brought up Burn the Witch when I was watching this with Brantley, and how this show uses magic in a fun way. It doesn't have a hard magic system where there's set rules, you can do whatever the fuck you want, and because of that, battles are like shooting rocks at people and then teleporting them back to your enemy and then striking them with lightning, which is redirected through a lightning rod. It's very fun. And I think that this show having this kind of weird ass like shonen battle system for its magic is really fun. And every chance that they do an action sequence, it's pretty good, or at least fun to watch.
Yeah. It being that loose means that like you get to easily compare the strength of characters. So, you know, if one person can do a wind slash, then someone else can. If someone can drop a bolt of lightning, someone else can. And so you get to see very directly what the proportion of those things are.
Yep.
It also helps that, like, I don't know, there is no need to sort of explain up each character as like a unique shonen star in the world of this magic system, you know? You don't have to go through and qualify like, now this person's specialty is this one move. Instead, it's just like, yeah, we're working with the elements and we're working with energy manipulation and force, and you're basically just kind of variations of that.
Yep. And we kind of see the difference between those mages when we see the next episode. Which, if you're free to move on, we can talk about episode 2.
We absolutely should.
So episode 2 introduces a new character into the midst. She's not exactly like I said, since this is an episodic thing, you don't totally see every character every single time. So in this episode, you get Saya, who is she's an apprentice witch at the time when they meet. Not an apprentice witch. She is wanting to be an apprentice witch. She has magic, so there is like mage, apprentice witch. And she needs to learn how to be an apprentice witch. And this episode's pretty interesting because Saya's very gay. And that's this isn't. I know Brantley and I like to be like, oh, they kind of have some Yuri undertones here, or they might suggest that this is a thing. Not, she's very, very into Elaina. She wants to be with Elaina specifically, and at first it's sweet in this episode because it doesn't seem to be nearly as horny as later, but it's pretty much just she looks at Elaina as a replacement for her sister who died, and she knows about Elena's powerful witchy aptitude, and she wants her to train her, but stay with her. And so you get this kind of real quick, short relationship with them, and it's fun. It kind of opens the world up a little bit, since the first one you only see Elaina and Fran fighting and them using magic. But I believe the world, the city that they're in is only mages. Is that right?
I think so.
And so you get to see like how they use like brooms to be couriers, and how all the stores have like landing pads for these people to land their brooms on it. So they have like doors on the top floor so that people can walk in on the top floor. It's really fun. It's really good. And they don't mention it. They don't go straight into like, oh yes, the land of mages has these so that people can land on it. They just do it. And it's really refreshing to see just, well, I believe I talked about this in another fantasy. I think it was Poochie Princess. But I was like, damn, it's just good to have straight fantasy, and damn, is it good to have just straight fantasy again.
I mean, this isn't very straight, but you get the...
Yes. So you get this nice little interaction with Saya about her family, and you get her story, and you also get a little bit of, there's a little bit of, it may be interesting, a lesbian relationship, and that changes later, but we can talk about it. Brantley, what do you think of episode 2?
Mixed. So, like, I appreciate that, like, the next episode is sort of following in suit with what Elena's learned. So it's like, all right, here's someone who's coming on strong. How do you say no? And Elena's not really to say no yet.
Yeah.
And so, that's interesting. It feels still very, like, authentic to that. And it's episodic for sure. Like, time has passed, but it feels right. I am kind of not a super big fan of Saya's character and like the romantic projection she has. I think it's creepy.
Yeah, I do too.
Even in this episode, it's like at a harassment level that if you would have exchanged Saya for a male character, then it would have totally read as like wrong. And so like I understand that like people of different genders and cultures are going to act differently upon each other. Like that's part of engendering yourself. Or being engendered by your society, is that you're going to interact with each other differently. But like, she doesn't take no for an answer, and that's not cool. In Nichijou, when they have the little bit where it's like things we think are cool,
Yeah.
We should just have a bit where it's just like things we don't think are cool.
Yeah.
Like, why do we don't want things we think are bad? Things that are bad, non-consensual harassment.
Yeah, and it gets pretty blatant. There are some good times where it's done in a charming way, but most of it's pretty bad.
Yeah. And so like that, those are the parts of the episode that I think are annoying and distracting from the actually interesting carry of it, which is, Saya actually being quite competent, but she's looking for an uplift.
Yeah.
And she's looking for like a social connection. Again, it's like, hey, I've seen that. I've been there. I've had that happen to me, so I can thoroughly relate. I feel like this is something that other people can relate to too. That's also not a thing that gets brought up a lot. So cool. I'm more shaky on the execution here, but I appreciate the story they're telling.
Yeah, and that's how I kind of feel. I feel like Saya had a really good chance to be a very, very good character, and I don't think that we ever got to see that in the first 6 episodes. So let's talk about episode 3, which I think is going to probably be our kind of hinge point for this show. So episode 3 is a 2-part episode. So there is like 15 minutes, or 12 minutes, whatever. And it starts off with Elaina getting flowers from this girl in a meadow, and she picks up the flowers and she goes to take them into a city, and the guards say, "Oh, you can't bring those flowers here; they're poisonous." And one of the guards goes, "But what if it's from my sister?" And the guard's like, "Yeah, it might be. Fuck that." And then he throws them in the fire, and it's still infected. That. Or he got him another way. It doesn't really explain because it's a very weird short episode. Turns out once you get the flowers, you get hypnotized to go and find the flower that it breeds from, and then it eats you and turns you into mulch. Now here's why this episode's weird. That's it. That's all the episode is. It starts, you find out about that, and then it's over, and Elaina does fucking nothing. Now, when we finished that episode, we're like, oh, maybe there wasn't anything that Elaina, or this part of the episode, I guess. Maybe there wasn't something Elaina could do. Maybe it was just, hey, shit happens. Magic is real and life is awful. But then the rest of the episode continues, and it kind of makes Elaina a shitty person. So do you want to talk about the flower part before I move on to the real issue with this episode?
Yeah, I mean, mostly the same things, same sentiments. That it's like, well, that's a weird sort of goosebump story tossed in here, I guess. But sure.
But she we might want to talk about why Elaina is doing all this stuff, why she wanted to be a witch, and why she's traveling.
Mm-hmm.
So she read a book when she was a child by a witch. Nike. I don't know how to pronounce
Nike.
Nike,
Yeah.
but it's spelled Nike. And Nike is a traveling.
Pick a way to pronounce it and just do it.
Well, dude, God fucking damn it. Shit, I
will kill this podcast with my own hands and these vocal cords. This dumbass brain of mine.
So Nike traveled around the world and documented everything she saw. And that's what Elaina wants to do. And once Elaina became a witch, her dad was really sad because she was leaving home at age 15, which is very early. And her mom was like, here are the 3 rules. You're not better than anyone. Run if there's ever danger, and come home and visit us. And so far, she's only followed one of those goddamn rules, and that is run if there's ever danger.
Mm-hmm.
Elaina rarely ever puts herself in a situation where she can help people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because the idea of a neutral observer is fun, but boy, is it not always great, especially with what's gonna happen in this episode. So after the flower thing, we just kind of assumed that maybe there wasn't anything Elaina could do, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we already know she's a powerful witch, but we don't really know what magic can do at this point.
World building, yeah.
Right, so we're like, okay, maybe there isn't. So she meets this guy who looks like a young He-Man, who has the bowl cut and everything, who's bottling happiness for a girl he likes. And you're like, oh, that's kind of cute. And Elaina goes...
That's kind of straight.
Very heterosexual. And Elaina kind of thinks back to a story she read about how there was a wife who couldn't get out of bed, and how her husband was doing the same thing. And she's like, I don't know how this story ends, but I remember reading about this. So the boy's like, hey, why don't you come over to dinner because you're a powerful witch? And then you meet the girl he likes, and it's his slave girl, who is being groomed and abused by his father because he is bad. Not a bad written character, just a straight up evil motherfucker. There's implications of sexual abuse, there's definitely implications of physical abuse, and there's a part where the slave girl drops a jug, and Elaina fixes the jug, and then almost murks the dad. And we are like, hell yeah, Elaina, kick his ass, beat his shit in. And she doesn't. She she kind of says, we'll make sure, just be a little bit more careful. She kind of goes back into this passive mode. So at this point, you can kind of see that Elaina has morals. She has standards. She does not agree with this guy. But she doesn't use her power or her action to do so. Now, we're not really told what the world's like opinion on slavery is, what the legality of it is, how everyone sees it. But like, if Elaina seems to already think it's a bad thing, chances are it's a bad thing in most places of the world. So it's kind of the issue I have with like Shield Hero, right? Where you have a character who knows slavery is evil and slavery is wrong, but they enable it because she doesn't do anything. She leaves. And the boy shows the slave girl all the happiness he bottled, and she gets real depressed because she's basically stuck never being able to see it. And it implies that she's going to kill herself. It was heavy. It was like, oh.
And then Elena's like, I remember what the end of that story was. It was the same thing.
Yeah,
the wife got sad because she couldn't go see it.
And I can see it being used as a good character build-off, a good way to explore a character's ideals. But the next episode doesn't, because the show is episodic. And so you don't really see the effect it has on her. And I wouldn't even say Elena's a bad person, because we see her do good things to help people, but for some reason then and there she didn't do anything.
Yeah, it feels flubbed. It's like, it wasn't even a case of like, I'm young and I don't know how to stand up to people yet, and so like there's an anxiety thing here, or like I feel like I can't take care of this person once I do a big emancipation on this.
Do a murder.
But they aren't visualized, and so that makes it very troubling. I also want to sneak in that they clarify that Nino, the slave girl, is from an Eastern country. She's very like overly apologetic. She's very timid. The same thing went with Saya, who is also highly apologetic, very timid personality.
Isn't she
also from supposedly an Eastern country, right?
Yeah. They mentioned that,
and so it's like,
and it's like there's definitely some exploration to do here, right? Because there is this fetishization of Asian women in a lot of white cultures, right? And that's normally what they do. And while Saya is like, despite the fact that she is timid and like that, she's not really. It comes down to her being more like trying to trick Elaina to stay, right? And then it turns out she's a really competent person who can take care of herself, and it was just more of a ploy. So it seems like the author knew what they were doing, right? Like, obviously the author's Japanese, and it seems like he was aware of this stereotype, and it seems like he knew what he was doing, but he didn't explore it. And I guess the worst part about it is that the story feels unfinished. Like, obviously it's implied that it has a tragic ending and it's going to be really sad, but we don't see Elaina react to it. Now, she might. That's one of the things. We've only seen the first 6 episodes. So it could be, hey, here's some episodic backstory moments for Elaina, and here's how they're going to play into her life in the future.
Not that episode, though.
Yeah.
Because at the end of it, she's like, and I never found out what happened.
Right. And
that's where it's like disheartening. And it's like, oh god, is she not going to change from this? Are we going to get centrist Elaina for the rest of the series? Like, what's going to happen here? So, yeah. It's troubling. It's troubling.
Yeah, it is.
And then
I feel like I have so much more to talk about regarding this, but there really isn't much more to talk about.
Yeah, it's kind of cut and dry, which is unfortunate, just,
And I know people were happy for stuff like this. Like I've been reading the discussions threads on Reddit about it, and people are like, wow, that's shitty of Elaina to do. But it's kind of interesting to see a neutral character. And I really wouldn't even say that's neutral. That's just passive, And
I'm glad to see that the Magical Girl Raising Project fans are out there still swinging,
and like...
Hey, where are Yuki Yuna fans at? Oh, they're watching Wandering Witch, The Journey of Elaina.
God, fuck. Hey, we have people that like...
Oh, shit! I knocked down the hornet's nest! Go, go, go! Next topic, let's go!
And like, one of the things is like, since this is episodic, the next episode is not even directly remote to it. The next episode is even more of passive Elaina, but it's a lot more interesting. Do you want to give a quick recap of episode 4?
I don't know if I can.
Mm-hmm.
Elaina flies into totally ruined city. Big beastie outdoors. Spitting fire, eating corpses. Terrifying. Goes into a castle for shelter, passes through a magic barrier in the process, and Mira Rose is there, and she has no memories of who she is. But she does have a note, and that note basically says, hey, you gotta defeat that monster, Javelier. And so she's like, I guess I gotta do it. I gotta prepare. And so she does, and she sets up an idea for a trap for the big monster. She's gonna drop it into a gigantic pit, and then just blast the fuck out of it. And that's the plan.
That is the plan, and it works.
And so, yeah, she's like, okay, I need to preserve my strength. Elaina, could you help me dig this pit? And Elena's like, sure. And so Elaina doesn't like use like her magic particularly to do this. She's kind of... Wait, what did she do?
She animates the dolls and teddy bears of the dead children of the city to unbury the pit.
Which is like a little weird that it's like you don't have an earth spell that could do this.
We've never seen people do it though.
Yeah.
But it is soft magic. I feel like they could have just made a hole.
Yeah. And so anyways, big pit gets dug by the cast of Zatch Bell. Or wait, does Zatch Bell have more puppets than just the one, or is it like does everyone get a puppet?
It's all about puppets fighting puppets, but there's no teddy bears as far as I know. But yeah.
Okay, that's the Bleach mascot, right? No, that's a lion.
I have no fucking clue.
I'm like 0 for 2. I'm not gonna take a third swing. I'm just gonna go sit the bench. So, they chase down the monster. Mira Rose gets detention. And they lure it into the pit, and it falls in essentially like it's an illusion. And then she's just like lasering the hell out of it. It's just like
very graphic too. Like,
yeah, she's ripping it apart basically. And in this time, she goes from these like red robes to like black robes, and has this revelation in her memory that the monster was her transformed father. Basically, her father didn't like that she had fallen in love with the cook, and so had the cook executed. Mira Rose then turns him into a big monster, erases her memories, and then goes on to a plot to kill that monster.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Like, it's definitely like, I don't want to say it's over-exaggeration, like it is. It absolutely is. But, like, it makes sense that she would want revenge on her father and society for saying that she can't love who she wants. But, like, those peasants in the farm did not need to be eaten by a dragon for that shit to happen.
Yeah.
Her father...
The straights are at it again, Grant. See, in this show, straight people cause problems. That's all we can divine so far. And that's actually consistent in some of the other episodes we watched.
So it's wild because, like, it makes sense that she'd want to fight her father and kill her father because her father killed her love. And what's once again wild about this? Well, not wild. It's actually kind of upsetting because Elaina did more to help this woman she barely knows get revenge on a dragon she barely knows what's the problem with it. And she did more to do that than to free a slave girl. Like, yeah.
And she even in this episode says, I shouldn't get involved, but I'm getting involved.
Right.
It's like,
and
really?
Yeah.
Against this death threat?
She doesn't do much after she unburies the thing. Remember, she goes out to see if she can help. It almost gets killed by Maria Rosé's blasts, right?
Onslaught.
Yeah, and like, once again, some fun animation. There's some really good turnaround stuff with her on the brooms. The broom flying in the show is really fun. And then like the magic she uses is pretty cool because it's some laser blasts and then some swords, and like this thing gets fucked, man. And you're like, wow, cool, this thing killed everybody, and then you realize that it's all this bitch's fault. And then Elaina tries to sneak off before breakfast because she's been cooking and baking for Elaina for the past couple days, and she's talking to her dead lover who's not sitting in the chair, like she's just mentally snapped. And it's fairly tragic, which is weird because the first 2 episodes were not this. And it's not that this show can't have differing like themes and tones, but the next show is nothing like this episode or the previous episodes. The next episode is fairly happy. And is the next episode the Truth Tellers, or is it the Magic School?
We see Fran again. Okay. So essentially we go Fran, Saya, episode Fran, Saya.
Yeah. So the next episode, Elaina is kind of interested in going to not going to a magic school because she's already like one of the world's best witches, but she's going to a magic school to see it because she's never been to one. And once again, if Elaina followed the rules of her mom, it would make a lot more sense in terms of why she doesn't try and get involved in like dangerous things. But she always feels like she is way above people. Like she walks into the school and she's like, "Oh, you're not going to let me in? I'm a witch." And they're like, "No, we're not going to let you in."
This has established a pattern now where in episode, what was it? So we established a pattern across at least episode 3 and episode 4 and now episode 5 that Elaina will just fly in somewhere and take domain.
Yeah,
which is admittedly funny, and she does it again in episode 6 too.
Yeah, and I agree. It is
that's funny, but it's like it's weird without the progression.
But it is awkward too because you can kind of justify yourself her not getting involved with dangerous thing is that her mom told her not to, right? Mm-hmm. But she doesn't visit them because in this episode it's revealed that she hasn't visited them since she left, and she does think she's better than everybody, and so she's not following these rules actually at all, except for the one that makes it so that she gets to be kind of just like, it's not my problem.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this episode.
Mm-hmm.
We spent the entire episode wondering what's gonna go wrong.
Yeah.
So she comes in and she's like, "Hey, let's go to the magic school," and she gets kicked out. But all the students who look like Harry Potter characters want to interview her because she's a very powerful witch. And you do get a really fun broom chase scene. There's some parts where like she'll drop her broom and then she'll fly off. The broom will fly off and then she'll fall and then she'll re-summon it. And the summoning animation's very basic, but it's really fun because it's very snappy. Mm-hmm. And then you get a lot of fun stuff. And then she talks to Fran, and Fran's like, "Hey, help these students become good at magic." And you get kind of like this really sweet montage of her helping these students with magic. Although one of them asks her a sexually suggestive comment, and then he gets thrown across the courtyard. Just once again, the straights are at it again.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends with Fran kind of talking to her about how she needs to go visit home and how she doesn't really have like a shtick, because Fran always has butterflies and she has her starry robes, and Elaina doesn't have that. She just...
Elaina, you need a gimmick.
Yeah, she needs a gimmick. And so she suggests that Elaina has flowers or butterflies, and then she's like, no, you have butterflies. And then as she's leaving, she animates a bunch of flowers that are in the shape of butterflies, and it's really fucking cute.
Mm-hmm. Extremely.
Oh, but Fran also lost a book that she was writing because she decided to also document her information, her travels, and Elaina finds that someone published it without her knowledge, and she has like this little fan club, and it's really cute.
Mm-hmm.
But
she has a statue in that city.
Yeah.
I think, and it's like, that's adorable.
But it's wild that this comes after an episode in which a very mentally unwell woman murders her father, who turned into a dragon after he genocided her town. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
and that she willfully erased her own memories in that process, and then like subjugated herself to a weird game of that.
Yeah, and
it's just like
it's wildly inconsistent. And once again, it's okay to have tonal shifts, but I think when your show is episodic, it makes it incredibly jarring, and it makes it incredibly hard to figure out what you're trying to tell a story. Because the next episode's the same thing. It's another kind of happy-go-lucky. It has a really cool idea. And it's called the Town of Truth Tellers, or the City of Truth Tellers. The
Land of Truth Tellers. Because I'm looking at the Wikipedia.
Hell, yeah.
Land.
But, so basically, this guy has a really ugly sword, and as long as he wields that ugly sword, everyone has to tell the truth. And that
Zone of Truth land.
Yeah, it's Zone of Truth. No one can lie, but everyone knows they can't lie, so no one says anything. They all write things down so they can still lie. And it's like, wow, that's an interesting concept, and it is. And then Saya comes in, and she acts like she acts incredibly vulgar and just really, really frustratingly not good. Have you ever seen, what's that one show? Certain Scientific Railgun.
Yeah.
It's like that relationship, where it's played off as a gag and not really actual emotions. And it's frustrating, because the author clearly has written nuance before. There's some really good parts in the first episode, and even, in the fourth episode, despite it being wildly different, it's still written in a way that isn't, like, played off as a gag, right? Mm-hmm. But for some reason, this is the gag he chooses. And I don't know if this is the same in the light novel. It might not be. In the light novel, it might be incredibly straight-faced and very, like, well done. But in the anime, it's just awful. But Saya comes to this land of truth tellers to try and solve the problem. And her and Elaina get wrapped up in trying to do it. And there's a witch that called in Saya, because Saya is now part of like this coalition of witches that go and solve problems. So it's not like witch culture is inherently passive, right? Which is another thing you might be able to argue about Elena's passivity and not freeing the goddamn slave girl. But and so they stop they break the truth spell, and the witch that called them in gets the job done, and she becomes a witch again. And then everyone goes back to being happy. And that's that episode. So this episode is, once again, just kind of like, it's not nothing, right? Because we get to see Saya be an actual witch. And we get to see Elaina do some more stuff, right? We get it. It happens. But when you have all this deep shit before it, and then nothing happens, you're like, okay, what does it mean? I feel like the writing process of the show was very much, I want to write a bunch of short stories, but I need something to tie it all together.
I agree. It's disappointing that the threads aren't there, because it feels like the stories were built to have those threads, and it almost feels like it's harder to write without just going ahead and just threading them, because it is chronological. You know, the authors explicitly will state through Elaina when time is passing. Mm-hmm. And so it's unnerving to us that, like, Elaina is not growing. Which, granted, you know, some people would say that's realistic. With what she's going through, I would disagree. But, you know, we can argue all day on that. So, with invisible people who aren't commenting on this video, hey, comment on this video,
please.
Tell us things.
So I think now that we've kind of recapped and talked about the episodes kind of in a little bit, I kind of want to explain, like, this show and what I want it to be. Because we don't know what the fuck... What do you want to see in the next 6 episodes?
Fran.
Yeah. I mean, explain, obviously, but, like, I know why.
Probably because, like... she does have nuance as a character. She's an adult who hasn't figured it out, and so she's a great foil to Elaina, who thinks she has it figured out, but she's still young. Mm-hmm. And so I think they both have something to learn from each other. I like the character archetype of, like, the adult who's sort of underwater. Mm-hmm. So literally just Ursula from Little Witch Academia.
Right.
Same thing. And I love that there too.
I do want to say that as where we're at right now, Elena's like 18, 19, 20. It doesn't really, it states that she's 18 at the start of, like, at the end of episode 1. And then occasionally it'll be like 3 months have passed, 6 months have passed, but I haven't been keeping track. So Elaina is an adult, but she's definitely like a young adult. Right.
Yeah.
And Fran seems to be like mid-30s.
Mm-hmm. I guess I would still state that Elaina has the mind of a child.
Yeah. Yeah. Her view is very simplistic. I think it's less about it being a child, and one of the things that they talk about early on is that her mom didn't want Elaina to think that everything came easy to her. And that that hard work is important. And I think that Elaina does work hard. But I think that she's so naturally gifted that when something doesn't go her way, it makes her feel like, fuck this, right? So yeah, I mean, in all honesty, when I was like 18, 19, I felt the same way. So I wouldn't even say mind of a child, just someone who just a young adult trying to figure out what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. I totally agree with that. I still think that they're interesting foils for each other, and ultimately, I think it's the thing that I've liked the most of the show. So when I'm seeing things that just don't quite hit execution expectations, it's like, well, you hit your intention and your execution on this, so why not just do more of that? That technically goes against the plot of the show, which is that Elena's going to go travel and essentially experience lots of new things.
Yeah,
I guess I as someone who, is in the privileged position of being like, hey, I get to watch and enjoy this. I like Fran the most, and I think her stories are the most successful with Elaina, and so I'd like to see more of that.
I do too. I think that I wish Fran was more consistent. I wish that she was a traveling partner for Elaina. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that really kind of makes me like about Elaina is that she doesn't get to talk about what she's experiencing. Mm-hmm. So you as the viewer are basically just getting her internal monologue every couple whenever. And it's like, oh, that's okay. It can work. But since she doesn't get to like actually sit down and talk about what she is seeing, it's like, man, is she okay?
Yeah, you want her to unload. She has a diary. Like, that's kind of the whole premise, right? She's going to go and fill this thing out, like her inspiration. And they rarely ever use it as a tool. And that feels kind of disappointing. And, like, we're saying a lot of things that disappoint us about the show. I think, on the whole, we're still pretty optimistic about it. So, run with that. But it is like, it's weird that the show introduces, and by extent the light novel introduces things that it decides not to take advantage of.
And
they did the work and they throw it away.
And I think that, in my opinion, I think this show would have been okay being episodic, but if either Fran or Saya stayed with Elaina as she traveled, much more would want Fran to do it. But I think if she had anybody that could talk to her, I think since all of her dialogue and all of her understanding of the situation comes from the people that are in the situation, it makes it really hard for her to see the outside perspective. And I think that's part of the reason why the show is both frustrating and also interesting. Because you don't get an outside look at what it is. But it's still, it's kind of like, man, I love a lot of things about these characters. I just wish they would interact more outside of maybe seeing each other and then talking about the setting.
Yeah, they're strong when they get to, be foils. They're strong when they get to contrast each other and essentially bring out the best and worst in each other. And so when you kind of get that lopsided effect, or you're trading places a lot, then it definitely feels like it weakens the experience. Here's an obvious one: Cowboy Bebop. You always have essentially your fleshed out cast, even if it's as small as Jet and Spike. You usually have a duo of characters who get to work out some of these things, and then you see enough of that you triangulate how their personalities work together and what their values are, that by the time they start doing individual episodes, and just having, like, here's a character piece on Spike or Faye or Ed, Jet, that you now have, like, located yourself in that narrative. You kind of know where on the map they place themselves. And I think this could benefit from that, from having a more consistent cast.
Yeah, and I think we haven't seen Elaina have any other emotion besides, like, we've seen her be angry at the slave owner but not do anything. We've seen her get scared of the dragon, but we still haven't seen her have as much of an emotional response as she did when she failed against Fran in the first fight. And I think that because we've kind of lost this human connection to Elaina, it's kind of making her harder and harder to be interested in. Her character design is great, and her little quips and personality is fun, but it's very surface level at the moment. And I think that since we aren't getting vulnerable Elaina, or even, like, worried Elaina, it's making her less interesting as a character.
Oh no, do you want a critical hit?
Yeah.
She's a Kirito.
Oh, fuck. Yeah. Oh boy. This is very early Sword Art Online now that I'm thinking about it, because, like, the first couple episodes of Sword Art Online before Kirito actually, like, meets Asuna and does actual things, he's very much that. He's just a passerby.
I thought Sword Art Online, when I first watched it, I thought Sword Art Online was episodic, because here's the thing, they have these chronological spaces in which our young hero starts, makes a splash, then, pairs up with someone, and then they break off, and then trauma happens, episode 3. And then some more like awkward brooding stuff, and a dragon is there. And then eventually it grows into, like, an actual, like, continuity.
Man, I kind of hope this show does that, but better than Sword Art Online.
It's weird to be thinking, like, I hope you take cues from Sword Art Online.
And you know what? A better example might be Little Witch Academia. Because Little Witch Academia's first few episodes are pretty episodic. There's not as much traveling, and there's not as much new characters, but they overall don't have nearly as much as an impact to the rest of the series. That being said, because they have similar characters throughout the show, you do get to see character growth, and you get to see how they interact. Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That is
You also get a MacGuffin in Little Witch as well, which means that, you know, in the series, it's like, well, I guess we're collecting things, and so that has to be consistent to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but yeah, I hadn't thought about this until now, and so now it's like, you know what? Let's revisit this when we're done with because this is our preview. When we get to the real review, we'll have to really think about this.
We will.
The light novel DNA.
It does have light novel DNA. I once again feel like this show suffers from I will hold true that turning a light novel into an anime is probably going to always end up poorly. So far, I've enjoyed this show. I've had fun. There's been lots to talk about that are good. A lot of it has been kind of like rapid. So like seeing the broom tricks, seeing some of the magic things, seeing Elaina break down and actually have feelings in the first episode. All that shit's incredible. And I'm just hoping we get back to it.
Yep. Hey, think of it this way. For the longest time, we all thought that you couldn't make movies out of comic books.
That's true.
So maybe, and like there's a light novel here and there that I like the adaptation of. I'm pretty sure Durarara started as a light novel. Mm-hmm. And so like, hey, there's one that I would definitely pitch as a 10 out of 10. As you know, we're going to be down on this, but it's now in the hands of Elaina to give us our next little data point on this.
Yeah, it will be interesting. So, where do you want to see the series go?
I think I want it to, as we said, I want it to sort of embrace a continuity. If it's going to give us this chronology of Elaina, then I want to see how these things have impacted her. Even if it's like she's been repressing it and now it all kind of just comes up to the surface, cool. I would be okay with that. But like I feel like they have good themes, and I want them to make use of it. So I think that this is ultimately a show about being like privileged and or a gifted student, and they carry that pretty well. In terms of like, showing what that's like. Because you're on a technical level, you're skilled, you're excelling in your field, but you are also an outsider. Like you're someone who doesn't fit in. And granted, I'm making some reaches here because I'm not this. But I know I am privileged, and so I know that say when you enter a community or a situation that requires experience in essentially traumatic situations and requires empathy, that sometimes you're not equipped for that, that you can only sympathize, and that you're not ready to actually make a difference, and you kind of have to walk away with your tail between your legs, or in this case your broom.
Well, Elaina sits on her broom sideways, so it's not between her legs.
That's true. So you got me there. So when she goes to Celesteria, she's like, yeah, I think this is my favorite place. It's kind of like, well, no wonder. It's like a college town, basically. Like a very like well-off high school. The students are all, working essentially internships. It's pretty high class. It's a very clean city, blue skies, and so like, she finds herself fitting in a very self-serving community. It's very academic. It's very rewarding to someone who works in academia to keep working in academia. If you're good at school, congratulations, you can work at school.
Right.
And so like that tracks. And so I guess I appreciate that as a character study in that this works. And so I would like to see them fully commit to that. And fully break down Elaina in both these situations if that's what they really care about. If Elaina doesn't have the experience and empathy to mitigate bad actors in the world, or to deal with systemic oppression and everything in between, then I want to see how she's logging that and how that's affecting her. After all, the thrust of the show is that she wants to be this person whose journeys are worth documenting and sharing. So I'm waiting on that, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. No, I think I'd agree. I think I've read the plot synopsises of the next couple episodes, and while they don't technically seem like they're going to necessarily be what we want, they do seem to be a little bit more confined on having Elaina do things to help people. So maybe we'll get her kind of look back at her mistakes and talk about that in her diary, her journal. With that said, it's still, I feel like the show would have benefited from being a 24 episode anime. And I feel like we say that all the goddamn time. But I think being able to see more of the slow build up, if they wanted to keep it this episodic, I think if you had a cast of characters that were consistent, then I don't think it would need to be 24 episodes. But if you wanted to have it be a slow episodic build up, I feel like we need more time for Elaina just to be her for a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Oh, there's one thing I want to talk about. At the beginning of the show, when Elaina gets her witch outfit, which, by the way, good witch outfit.
Witch outfit.
She gets a hat.
Big hat.
Big hat. And her mom gives her another hat. And Elaina goes, "Why do I need two hats?" And her mom goes, "Well, you might lose the other one." And one, fucking love the mom for that. Very good character interaction. And two, she gives her other hat to Saya. And I thought that was a really, really fun moment in episode 2. But then when Saya comes back, Elaina barely remembers her.
And it's like, that's your hat.
That's your fucking hat.
That's your hat.
It's a pretty wild, it's like they want you to know that Elena's full of herself, but they also want you to think that she's a good person, and you can't have both without self-reflection, and we get none of that. So who made this show, Brantley?
The director. I just wanted, I honestly don't have a deep review here, but I pulled up the director's profile. So this is Toshiyuki Kuboka. I don't know. I need to do a fine-tooth comb on this sometime. But I feel like we've seen a lot of shows that have people involved in Aquarion. Usually I see Aquarion Evol, but I don't know. It probably sticks out to me because it's when it says anime staff positions, it's alphabetical. And so if they worked on Aquarion, it's up at the top. But here's another guy who did that, I guess. This is someone who's been working at it for a while, at least as I've seen, as early as 80s stuff. But I just wanted you to know, out of all the things that he's worked on, which is plenty of stuff, all over the map. We have some idol shows, we have sports stuff, we've got serious adventure series Nadia Secret of Blue Water. We've got flirty 80s OVAs Dirty Pair. Legitimately all across the map this person's been on it. but I think the one that you'll enjoy is that he worked on Gunbuster.
Did he?
Yep.
What was his role in that? Was he also the director?
Chief animation director.
Really?
Also, apparently character design and key animation for episode 2.
That's pretty wild, and it kind of makes sense. I think that the people that animated this, by the way, is C2C Studio. They're weird, and the fact that like they opened in 2006, right? They were founded in 2006. They didn't get their own they probably did finishing animations and like corrections up until 2012, where they got their first anime, which is called Euromates 3D, which I doubt was good. But other than that, they haven't done anything particularly popular, except they did do Aquarian. They did Aquarian logos in 2015.
Yep, that's what he worked on. So
they did the one that I think is their most popular thing is Hattori Bochi no Maru Maru Shikatsu, which I know a lot of people liked. It's a very cute, wholesome show. So they're not particularly well known, but I will say that they did a very good job at this show. There's a lot of fun little character beats, and the opening to the show is so good. But it's so far, I would say it's a little disappointing. I think that's my final one word reveal about this show is just a little disappointing. That's 3 words, but you know what I mean.
I agree.
So do you have any hypotheticals for our Wandering Witch, The Journey of Elaina?
Yep. So, Grant, you have been tasked with writing a light novel spinoff about Fran.
Hell yeah.
What is it about?
So I would want to focus on her before she was a witch. I feel like there's a lot of untold like stories of how she is as a person, right? How her teaching style versus her incredibly good power level and her love for butterflies, right? I would like to see, and it seems that she came from like an academic background, and I'm a sucker for magic schools. I would like to see Fran. I'd like to see the more traditional way of becoming a witch. I think it would be fun to explore that through Fran's eyes. Growing up wanting to be a witch, not because Fran doesn't seem like she's a gifted witch in terms of not like just like a natural prodigy. She seems to have worked very hard for it, and I think it would be nice to see her go through the learning process, kind of delve a little bit more into the history of the world, as well as who she is. And then I would also like to see one with her as the head professor. I would love to see more of teaching Fran. What about you?
Totally. Yeah, I would love prequel material, I think. Just because she, we've already got some of that hinted here. I would love to see even just like a little spin-off about her writing that book for a while before it gets stolen. Better yet, you know what would be fun? If they actually published the book of her adventures.
Oh, that would be fun. Yeah.
I'd love that.
I would. Yeah.
And then you can guarantee, like, yeah, this is just Fran. This is Fran being Fran.
Yeah, I would dig that quite a bit.
As someone who has indeed written fan fiction and not published it, sorry, you can't go find it. I would totally dig just sitting down and getting writing fan fiction.
That's pretty good.
I have one more. I have a request for you, actually.
Okay, let's role play.
Nope. Hey, Grant.
Yes,
I got you something.
What'd you get me, Brent?
Now, I know people haven't really been honest with you lately, so I think you're going to really appreciate this. Okay, close your eyes. Hold out your hands.
Okay.
You notice a large metal triangle behind my back. I accidentally drop it, and you hear it clatter noisily to the ground. I turn around to pick it up and hide it. What do you do?
I am so fucking confused. What the fuck?
It's the big liar sword from the 6th episode.
Ugh. Oh, that's a tiny ass D20 that I have in my hand. What the hell? This is so small. I couldn't.
Don't make me God mode you in this roleplay right now.
Sorry, I picked up a D20 to make some dice sound effects so that I can expand on the joke, and I picked up the world's smallest D20 that I don't think is mine.
Hey, see, you're already under the sword's effects.
I roll for attack. Does a 16 hit?
Yeah, of course it does. I'm a commoner. I'm just a citizen.
Alright.
What's your damage?
That's a 13.
You've slain me.
Hell yeah. How much commoner EXP?
I don't know.
Dude, that sword is god-awful, but it's supposed to be. I would like to say that they do mention that sword sucks.
I fall to the ground, but like I'm cold before I hit the cobblestone. As I bleed out and you reach for the spoils off my body, you notice that I've scripted out an order signed by the town governance that every tapestry will indeed be emblazoned with a sewing of you and that goddamn sword.
So do you have any final thoughts about I don't know the Japanese version name of Journey of Elaina. All I know is it's tabby 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 somewhere, and I love that.
That's the name of it. Tabby 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 somewhere. Also known as Wandering Witch.
Do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think we've covered everything.
All right, I do look forward to finishing the show. I think there is some hype in my chest for how the show is going to play out.
Agreed. I am, despite everything, optimistic still.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope you join us for when we do finish the episode. If you like what you heard, like, comment, and subscribe so that, I don't know, maybe you can put this on while you're cleaning your room or when you don't need to pay attention to all of it, because we're honestly not worth the entire hour and a half you listen.
Now, we can't tell you to clean your room, but, we're not your dads. So.
We will be. Our next episode we're going to do is going to take a little bit of a turn. It's going to be another unfamiliar territory, but it's going to be kind of a mix of mediums.
The killing school life begins. We're going to review Danganronpa in anime and in game form in some ratio. So, our review, will it be black and white? Or will we find the pink mess in between?
That was terrible. See y'all. Have a good one.